just keep me from all wrong.
In Shechem, in the story of Jacob, as Jacob's growing older. And so it opens up now. Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. I'm going to stop there. There's a couple things we want to talk about in connection with just this first verse. And I don't want to get, I spent a lot of time digging through the weeds of all the different commentary and discussion about what this chapter's about. And they parse down to phrases and words and go into all kind of detail historically about why that phrase means something specific. I don't want to get too deep in the woods along those lines, but I do want to highlight a couple of things. A lot of people make a lot out of the fact that it says that Dinah was the daughter of Leah. It does not identify her as the daughter of Jacob. Some people make something out of that. I'm not sure that I make anything more of it out of the fact that how many women did he have children from? Count again. 4. He had children with 4 different women. So it seems very logical to me to identify who the mother was. We know who the father was. The question is, who's the mother? So that's all I put into that statement. She went out to visit the daughters of the land. I do put a little bit more emphasis on this phrase as being significant to the story. We don't necessarily use that term visit the way that the Bible uses that term visit. If we go visit, what does that mean to us? Yeah, we just go see somebody. When the Bible says to visit widows and orphans in their distress, does it mean just to go see them? It means to go engage with them. And I think that there is some significance in this text with that word as well. That when it says that she went to visit the daughters of the land, she wasn't just going out on a sightseeing mission to see what it was like. She was going out there to engage with them. And who are these people again? They're Canaanites. Okay? These are the people that you'll recall. Her uncle, who was her uncle? Esau was her uncle. You'll recall that Esau actually took a wife from among the Canaanites. And did that please his parents? No, it did not. And so what did he do later on? He married another one just to irritate his dad. So there's already friction. Now, we're long before the point where God has created the nation of Israel and told them, don't marry these people. So don't project that back into this story. But there's already friction between these people. These people are generally the descendants of Ishmael. And there's already friction in issues. And the question could be raised, why is she leaving her house and going out to engage with the Canaanite people who have a different religion and a different type of life and a different practice and all that kind of stuff? Those questions are, I think, worthy of considering. I'll also mention this. There's a lot of people that make her a teenager at this point in time. I have no idea how old Dinah was. I can't find anything in the text that gives me a hard way to say this is how old she was. We don't even know exactly how many years it was between when he went back and when this happens. It's just a guess. And so I'm not going to say she was 14 or 15 years old. Although there are some scholars who insist that's about how old she was, which makes the story even more horrifying to modern people. Not all that horrifying to the time, I don't think, but more horrifying to modern people. But anyway, so she goes out to visit the daughters of the land, and when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Havite, the prince of the land. And so we now know why the city's named after him. His dad rules everything, and he's the prince. He is the one who is going to move into being in charge next, is the presumption. when he sees her, it says he took her and lay with her by force. Now, not all translations translated exactly that way. Generally speaking, most scholars view this as what we would consider a rape. There's a fair argument that can be made that it might not have been what we think of as a rape. I am going to read a little bit just kind of to help us understand what it might be saying and why it's still a problem, even if he didn't force it. Okay? The story has been called the rape of Dinah, although not all scholars agree she was raped, forced into sexual relations against her will. Unlike in the account of the rape of Tamar, which comes in 2 Samuel, unlike in the account of the rape of Tamar by her half-brother Amnon, we do not hear Dinah speak or cry out in resistance before Shechem takes her. Now, there's another reason for that. Has anybody read the chapter already? Do we ever hear from Dinah in this chapter at all? Not a word. We don't know what's in her mind. We don't know what her motives are. The closest we find out about anything that Dinah is thinking is verse 1, where she goes out to visit or to engage with the people of Canaan. So, anyway, it says, we don't hear that Dinah speak out or cry in resistance before Shechem takes her. Further, while Amnon violently overpowered Tamar despite her pleas of protest, it is not clear that Shechem forced himself on Dinah. Rather, he took her, lay with her, and debased her. A lot of translations use that word debased her rather than by force because of the Hebrew word that's used there. In the biblical world of the ancient Near East, when a virgin had sex outside of wedlock, whether seduced or raped, she was devalued in terms of her social status, bringing shame upon the family. Her virginity was crucial in negotiations over bride price and the familial allowances forged through marriage. And so, whether or not she was forced is not really the focus. Because even if she agreed and was completely consensual in the engagement, she was unmarried, she lost her virginity, and became damaged socially and brought shame upon the family. So it doesn't matter. And I think that's one of the reasons why we don't hear anything about that part of the story. We don't hear whether Dinah was in agreement or whether she protested. By the way, there's a lot more to this breakdown because when you get into the law of Moses that was given, there's a weird thing that happens where if something like this happened in the city, it would be assumed to be consensual if someone didn't hear her cry out. But if it happened in the country, it would assume to have been forced because nobody would have been there to hear her cry out. And so it gets kind of weird when you take all this kind of, but the fact of the matter is that has nothing to do with the story or the point. This is not really about what happened to Dinah. What happened to Dinah is the catalyst that creates what the story's actually about. All right. It was deeply, let's see where it did. Lay with her, okay, verse 3. He was deeply attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her. And that's one of the places where people have trouble, okay? If we say this is a rape and then it turns around the next verse and says he loved her and he spoke tenderly to her, that seems completely opposed to one another. Not clear to me which one it is, but they're different. And there's not enough information to actually say this is definitively what happened here. All right. Shechem spoke to his father, Hamor, saying, "Get me this young girl for a wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter, but his sons were with his livestock in the field. So Jacob kept silent until they came in. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you, I kind of give some credence to the idea that it wasn't a full-fledged forcible rape because of Jacob's response to it. he doesn't seem to get overly upset. He knows his daughter's been defiled, and that's upsetting, but he doesn't launch out to seek vengeance. It seems to me like if it was a forced thing, that there would be a high likelihood that he would have called his sons in to take care of this as quickly as possible. But anyway, he just kept silent about it. Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. The sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it, and the men were grieved, and they were very angry because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. Okay, so it's disgraceful, and he had relations with this daughter that had not been betrothed to anyone and was not a proper person to couple with. You got to be careful what words you choose to navigate this minefield. But anyway, it was disgraceful. Again, this language to me doesn't lend itself to be about the act of violence as much as it is the disgrace that what was brought upon the family. Yes.
Perhaps Jacob was silent because he was going to use justice until he spoke to Dinah to find out the true story.
Well, I mean, now, who knows? We don't have a whole lot of information about any of those things, and I bring it up simply to say I think sometimes we project into this story, and when we do that, we actually miss the point of why it's in the Bible. We're studying about Jacob, so why are we focusing for this chapter on his daughter? What does it have to do with the story that's being, not just the story of Jacob himself as an individual, but the story of Jacob in the greater scheme of what the storyline of the Bible is, which is moving us from Adam to Jesus. Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage, and intermarry with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. Thus you shall live with us, and the land shall be open before you. Live and trade in it and acquire property in it." In other words, what the father says is, look, let them married. We'll just kind of merge together, live together. You can live here. You can acquire property here. You can engage in trade here. You'll be part of us, and we'll be part of you. Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "If I find favor in your sight, then I will give whatever you say to me." Now, this is kind of important. Remember what I read a moment ago, that if you have a defiled woman, there is no betrothal and bride price and all of those things that were part of their system. In fact, under the law of Moses, which would come later, but under the law of Moses, if you took a wife and found out that she was not a virgin, what were you allowed to do? Get rid of her. That was considered an invalid, or a thing that invalidated the marriage. And so this is important stuff. And what this focuses on is, again, not Dinah, but what the man says is, look, let him marry. And by the way, you name the price, I'll pay it. In other words, he's offering to give a full bride price for Dinah. "Ask me ever so much bridal payment and gift, and I will give according as you say to me, but give the girl in marriage." Jacob's son answered Shechem and his father Hamor with deceit, and spoke to them because he had defiled Dinah, their sister. Again, there's this defilement thing there. That's the focus. They said to them, "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us." Well, they've already been disgraced. But anyway, that's their deceit. "Only on this condition will we consent to you." Now, they're not really consenting. They're not making an agreement. They're working a scheme. If you will become like us, in that every male of you be circumcised, then we'll give our daughters to you, and we'll take your daughters for ourselves, and we'll live with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and go. Now, their words seemed reasonable to Hamor. By the way, Hamor doesn't come across in this story as being the bad guy. Hamar's being completely above board. He goes to Jacob personally when he finds out what's going on, and he says, hey, this is what's happened, but my son loves your daughter, would like to marry your daughter. I'll pay the bridal price for her. They come back with, well, I'll tell you what, y'all, I'll have to be circumcised, and then we'll agree with your principle. And he says, okay, it seems reasonable. So the young man did not delay to do the thing, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. Now he was more respected than all the household of his father. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of their city, saying, these men are friendly with us. Were they? Not at all. They were being deceived. But they believed them. They were negotiating in good faith. Jacob's sons were not negotiating in good faith. But they go to their people and say, hey, they're friendly to us, therefore let them live in the land and trade in it. For behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters in marriage and give our daughters to them. Only on this condition will the men consent to live with us, to become one people, that every male among us be circumcised as they are circumcised. Will not their livestock and their property and all their animals be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will live with us. And so basically they go make the case to the people and say, look, this is going to be good for us, and it's going to be good for them. And they've just asked us to do this thing. So will y'all be willing to go along? All who went out of the gate of the city listened to Hamor, to his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of his city. Now it came about on the third day, when they were in pain, that two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword and came upon the city unawares and killed every male. And they killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and went forth. And Jacob's sons came upon the slain and looted the city, because they had defiled their sister. And they took the flocks and their herds and their donkeys, and that which was in the city and that which was in the field, and they captured and looted all their wealth and all their little ones and their wives. Listen, what they did is not any better than what Shechem did, and arguably worse. Even all that was in their houses. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble on me. Now, verse 30 is important. You have brought trouble on me by making me odious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And my men being few in number, they will gather together against me and attack me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my household. But they said, should he treat our sister as a harlot? Now, by the way, the treat our sister as a harlot part comes down to the fact that he offered to pay money. All right? So, I don't see anything in this context that makes this a forcible situation. It lends itself to me to have been a consensual situation that they tried to make honorable and right, but the sons of Jacob react extremely poorly. And that's where it goes in the end, is you've brought trouble on me by making me odious among the inhabitants of the land. All right, so is this chapter about Dinah and what happened to Dinah? Not really. We don't even hear from her. We don't know what her position is in any of this. We don't really even know for certain what happened to her. So why is it in the Bible? Okay, tells us something else more important than even that. But that's good. It does tell us why some of these things happen. Actually, I don't want to do that yet. I want to advance this slide first. All right, we need to think about some things here. How many sons did Abraham have? Ishmael. We do learn about Ishmael a little bit, but only enough to understand what? Why Isaac is chosen. He was a wild donkey of a man, and he was not the one promised, and he didn't come from the wife that was promised. And so we learn enough about Ishmael to learn why Isaac is the one that is followed from Abraham. How many children did Isaac have? 2. Esau is the other one, right? How much do we learn about Esau? Enough to know why God didn't choose him. He was rash, sold his birthright for a bowl of beans after just being out in the field for the day because he was starving to death. And if he didn't get them right now, he was going to die. And what good's my inheritance going to be if I die? He wasn't going to die from one day without food. But that's the way he thought. We also learn that he, even at birth, we're told that Jacob's the one that's going to rule. And then we follow Esau just enough to understand the things that he does that disqualify him, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, when he got on the outs with his father, and he knew that having a Canaanite wife bothered his father, what did he do? Went out in spite and took another one, just to irritate his parents. Is that the kind of person that God likes? Someone who spitefully treats his parents and irritates them, or someone who honors his parents? So we find out enough about Esau to understand why Jacob is chosen. Now the story gets interesting because Jacob has how many kids? How many sons? 12. How many of them can be chosen? 1. Who's going to be chosen? And the question becomes, who's going to be chosen and why? Ultimately, we actually know who's chosen. Now, we got to jump ahead, and I'm going to assume everybody in this room and most people online already know the story. So, which tribe, which son is chosen? Judah. Judah's number 4. How do we get to number 4? Yeah, sort of. Everybody else gets knocked out because of their own character and things that they do. Look at Genesis chapter 49. We're going to jump ahead just a little bit. Got to watch the clock. Genesis 49, we're going to find out how we get to Judah. Jacob summoned his sons and said, "Assemble yourselves that I may tell you what shall befall you in the days to come. Gather together and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity, preeminent in power." This all sounds good, doesn't it? You're my firstborn, and you're the beginning of my strength, and you have preeminent power over your brothers. And then he says, look at verse 4, uncontrolled as water. You shall not have preeminence because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. That has reference to the things that we read about back in what, chapter 35? No, maybe I'm getting ahead. 30, where was it at? Let's go back. Yeah, it's going to be in chapter 35. I'm a little bit ahead. So we're gonna read about that next. But Reuben is going to do something we're going to find out about that disqualifies him. And that's what we learn here. Then he says, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are implements of violence. Let my soul not enter into their counsel. Let not my glory be united with their assembly, because in their anger they slew men. And in their self-will, notice this is the exercise of their own will. They were not working with the plan of God. They were not doing what they were supposed to do. They were doing what they wanted to do. In their self-will, they lamed oxen. Poor little defenseless animals. Not only did they kill all the men, steal their wives and their children, steal all their money, they also just wasted their livestock. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So Simeon and Levi disqualify themselves because of the events that we just read about. And we got to keep in mind that a couple of things happen. When they do eventually come into the land and take possession of the land, Simeon's part of the land is within the part that's given to Judah. Okay? And then Levi doesn't inherit a portion of the land at all. They justify themselves to some extent at the giving of the law when they were against the golden calf and they were chosen to be priests, but they got cities throughout that's what he's saying. I'm going to disperse you throughout the land. You're not going to have an inheritance the way that the other people have. So all three of them, because of their own character and their own behavior, have disqualified themselves, and that's how we end up with Judah being the chosen one. The reason we have this story in Genesis 34 about Dinah and Simeon and Levi and the events that came up around Shechem is so that we can understand how Simeon and Levi got passed over to get to the lineage that the whole story is really about. So this isn't an afterthought, and this isn't a disconnected thought. This is actually integral to the story in helping us understand why it is that eventually coming out of Judah is how we get to Christ. Otherwise, what would we expect? Well, we would have expected to be Reuben, but we're going to find out how he disqualified himself. Then if it's not Reuben, then it ought to be Simeon. Nope, Simeon disqualified himself. Well, then Levi, well, no. Now, the other interesting thing is, when you look at Jacob himself, who would he have chosen? He would have chosen Joseph. Joseph clearly becomes his favorite. But that's not what God's plan was. God's plan becomes Judah. Judah is called a lion. And he says, and out of your hand, the scepter will never depart. So that's how we get from Jacob to Judah, eventually to Jesus. And that's why the story is in the Bible. It's not so much about what happened to Dinah. It's about what Dinah's brothers did to show their anger and their hatred and their impetuousness and their vengeful attitudes and their deceit. They didn't encourage these people to be circumcised and to join with them so that they could have fellowship with them and better them. They didn't say, well, we can't be in fellowship with you like that until you live up to the righteous standards of God. No, that's not why they're encouraging them to be circumcised. Why do they want them to be circumcised? So they have an unfair advantage when they go to kill them. so that while they're recuperating from their surgeries, they can slay them. Not very good character. And so there's a cost for that. There's always a cost. Anybody have any questions or comments about this? By the way, I'll make it clear, if you are convinced that she was raped, I have no problem with that. I'm just not as convinced of that. She stayed with him. He was in love with her. He was tender with her, it says. And he wanted to marry her. We never hear that she is voicing any opposition to this. Of course, we don't hear much from her at all. And she actually went out to interact with those people at the beginning. They didn't come and take her, so you can't call it a kidnapping either. She went to them. So anyway, I just think that the main focus of this story is actually explaining to us how we get to Judah. And that a lot of times we don't pick up on that. All right. If there's not anything or any questions anybody has about it, there's not any profitable way to get into chapter 35 and accomplish anything with the time that we have left tonight. So we're going to kind of go ahead and call it a night 3 minutes early, 4 minutes early, whatever it is. And we will pick up next time, Lord willing, in chapter 35.